Hello, I am Reverend Irene Smith, and I'd like to welcome you to Generationally Speaking. Here at the table, we come and we discuss life issues, no matter what they might be. As we sit at the table with each generation, we all learn, we all grow, we all are inspired.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, yeah.
Generationally Speaking.
Conversation, I think that was the one thing that I really enjoyed. You talked about the people that you had met along your way, and then your ability to serve while you were there. So share with us a little bit about that.
Absolutely. So I've always been a person, and I think we talked about it before, like service is very close, to the heart. And being able to just give my time and my energy to help, right? That's like high on my values list. And so, last year I went to another country in East Asia that unfortunately I can't disclose. But it was right after the monsoon season. And, I went with just an open mind, like, this isn't about me. This is about helping people. There are people in need. I have the means, the resources, and the time to help. And so that's what I did. And, it was an amazing experience because you see people who, I hate to sound like, the normal, typical American who like, oh, they have so little. But like, it's true. Like you see people who live happy, fulfilling lives with so much less, right? And they're willing to give everything, to be hospitable and to make a new friend, with you. And it's like the least I can do is reciprocate that hospitality, right? And so like it was a truly amazing experience. We helped clean up messes from the disaster. We helped families move back into their homes. We helped local churches as well. And more than anything, as much as I could, you help spread the gospel. I try to do like 3 big trips a year. But then also sometimes work in my business will take me, other places as well. And any opportunity, any free time that I get to help and serve, I try to do it. And no matter how small, even if it's just, going out and, handing out food on the street or going to talk and teach I've done like workshops, professional development workshops for people. I always try to find an opportunity to give back.
So as a person of color, African-American male, how do you mentally prepare yourself to go to these countries and then for them to receive you and for you to receive them? Because sometimes you're the first African-American people have ever intersected with one-on-one, and all they know is what they've seen on the TV or something. So how do you mentally prepare and how do you present yourself, in those countries?
Yeah. Well, I don't do much mental preparation. It ain't for me. It's more the mental preparation that I do is to prepare my mom and telling her that I'm going to this country. Like me traveling, oh my God, she just be like, yo, I'm just gonna lift you up in prayer because that's all I can do at this point. And I'm like, yeah, that's pretty much all you can do. Like there have been times where I would call her from the airport and she's like, where you going? I was like, oh, I'm on my way to Dubai. She's like, what? But I've learned to be a little bit more cautious.
Okay.
And really do the time to do research ahead of a trip. I've always been like, I see a affordable flight, buy the flight first, get on the plane first, and then in the last 2 hours of the flight, that's when you do your research. And I'm like, I'll figure out what I want to do once I'm there. But for most of the time that works out for me. But when I travel with other people, it don't really work out that well. So kind of what I do now is I do take time. I search recommendations. And I take into account what other people's experiences have been, right? However, as Americans, I find that we have a general misconception about the rest of the world and how the rest of the world works, right? We're often, and you know, not everyone, but many Americans, especially Black Americans, like we don't go any places that like as a group, many of us don't travel, all right? And so when you talk about going to, you know, places like, you know, Abu Dhabi and Dubai and Lebanon and Syria, even like places in Africa, you know, I go routinely to Senegal and South Africa and Egypt and places like that. Like everybody has the idea of the worst possible scenario. They think that because one person got robbed, that everybody who goes is gonna get robbed. And I'm like, no, that's not the case. Like my grandma would be like, don't they be doing this over there? I'm like, you watch that in a movie. I tell you, like I remember I went to Paris. She was like, don't they take people? I was like, that's a movie. Like I was sitting there like, tell me what do they do when they take people? Tell me about it. Not to say that those things don't happen, because they do, but like in mass, they're not. You know, it's not the reality that everybody can expect when they go to these places, right? So now I've learned to do that research, but also like I still want to experience it for myself, right? And as far as how I present myself, in a lot of contexts, I'm the only Black person that's there. You know, one of the first that many people interact with, and I look intimidating. Like, you know, there's no way around it. Like, I'm a big Black guy. Like, I look scary. Like literally, like, if I saw me walking down the street, I would go on the other way now. But like, I try to just be helpful. You know, I smile all the time. I can't help but smile. Like, so I'm always like that. But I approach my travels with a sense of curiosity and like wonder. You know, I'm not going into this place with any preconceived notions about what the experience will be. For the most part, I don't really travel to do luxurious things. You know, there are times and places for that, but when I travel, I want to be amongst the local people. So I, you know, will get a hotel or an Airbnb that is like in the heart of a community, right? And the thing I love about using Airbnbs is that it forces you to go out. It forces you to be out. Like, you don't have, you know, 24-hour, you know, maid service and, you know, room service. So you got to go out and do stuff. You got to go out and interact with people. And I try to picture what it's like to live there. And part of that is making friends, right? So where do you go to meet people? Like, what do you do if a stranger comes up to you and asks you a question? You know, I think about those things. That's why I always often try to learn the language. One of my best friends and I, we went to the Balkans. This was last year. We did a 16-day road trip throughout the Balkans. We hit about 5 countries on the road trip. And I told him, I was like, we started in North Macedonia. And I was like, by the end of this trip, I want to speak Macedonian. Like, I want to be able to hold a conversation in Macedonian. And it was like 4 days in, and I was like asking for directions in Macedonian. And he's like, how'd you do that? And I was like, I just tried. Like, you see, I'm talking to everybody that we see. like just don't be afraid. Like, the people are people, you know? And, you know, we made some amazing friends. We made some amazing connections. And, you know, it was a really successful and amazing trip. But I will say, I have had some pretty negative experiences as well. Like, my first international trip that kind of got me started, the travel bug, was to China. When I was a sophomore in high school. Yeah. And I did like a summer trip, you know, exchange program kinda. And, you know, Chinese people are, I can't say that out loud. It's not bad.
Direct.
But yeah, they're very direct, right?
Direct.
And, you know, it's, for many people, like, they don't see people that don't look like them, right? And so there were like, we were in, you know, Beijing or Shanghai or Zhangzhou, and you know, on the Great Wall, and people would follow you. They would stare at you. They would touch you, you know. And at the time, I had a little hair, so you know, they would like grab the hair, and more than anything, it was really awkward. They would take pictures of you, like, you know. And I remember, like, I was at the Great Wall, and I'm like using the bathrooms, which if you go to the Great Wall, don't use the bathroom. Use it before you go. They smell really bad. But I'm like, you know, using the bathroom. I'm at the little stall thing, And I turn around and it's a guy like maybe like 4 or 5 feet away from me, and he's just like, picture, picture. And I was in there like, I'm kind of busy. Like, what are you doing? And it was a very awkward situation. So like, I finish up and I turn around. As soon as I turn around, you just take a picture of me and walk away. Like, don't say nothing else. I was like, this is awkward. Like, is that not awkward to you? But then you also had like the interactions where many people, just like we have preconceived ideas that we gain from media or different stereotypes of other places, they have the same thing about us. And so I would go to shops and people were like, don't steal. And like, there was one shop in particular I went to where the shopkeeper, you know, as soon as I walked in, she was like, you can't touch anything. And I was like, what do you mean I can't touch anything? Like, I'm gonna pay. And she's like, no, we don't let you steal and all this stuff. I'm like, what do you mean? You know, but generally people are open, welcoming, and hospitable. And it's just, you know, you take the experience as it comes. And I use those negative moments to kind of show people different, you know, because they have unfortunately, many people have a bad notion of what it means to be Black American. Like I would tell people, I was like, I'm from Chicago. They're like, oh, you're from Chicago, gangsters and bang, bang, bang. And like people everywhere in the world do that. I'm like, no, like Chicago is much more than that. Yeah, but you know, that's just the reality of when you travel, like you got to deal with that. And so I always want to be the person that changes someone's perception of, you know, what it means to be, you know, a Black American, an American from Chicago, you know, a Black man even, you know. So it's fun, but it's also work.
Yeah. It's when you talked a little bit, and I was going to ask you about lessons learned from international travel and why more people of color should travel. And one, I heard you say exposure.
Yes.
Exposure to different cultures. I heard you say it opens you up, so don't come with preconceived, leave your American ways behind and be open and receptive to this new culture that you're walking into.
Absolutely.
And don't be so quick to take offense.
Yes. You gotta be very like cool about about things people say. Because people will say, you know, and they don't mean anything by it, but people will say the most offensive things. Like everywhere I go, I'm a bigger guy. So everywhere I go in the world, most people are smaller.
Right.
Like Asia, most people across the continent of Asia, most people are very little, right? And I remember this you know, this last time when I was in East Asia, I went to like, you know, take like these little bikes that you can get around. It's like not bikes, it's like motorcycle, mopeds. And you have a driver on the moped and stuff like that. And I knew, like, personally, I've done this enough. I've been in these countries enough to know that there are certain modes of transportation that I just can't do.
Right.
You know, but my friends are always like, that I meet, they're like, oh, you can do it because I do it. And I'm like, we aren't the same. Like, I am taller and weigh a whole lot more than you do, right? And so, you know, there was, you know, we go and we're going to get on this thing. And he's like, oh, it can hold you and all this stuff. And I remember I was like, I don't think that this is a good transportation for me. Like I'll wait for a taxi or something. And he was like, oh, just go on the bike. And so all the little bike drivers, they all just stop what they're doing and they're watching me. And they all like whispering to each other. I'm like, I know what that whisper means. They're like, no, he gonna get on your bike. Like, he'll get on your bike now. He gonna break my bike and all this stuff. And I was like, see, this is why I didn't want to do this. And so they called the guy over who I guess had the more strongest bike or the biggest bike or whatever. And I remember I was like, yeah, this bike ain't gonna hold me. And they're like, okay, get on the back. And I get on the back and the bike lowers drastically. And I just remember all the guys going, oh! I was like, oh my God, yeah, enjoy your laugh. Yeah, you got that. And the guy, he's like, he tells my friend that I was with, you know, he translated to me that the guy was like, he was like, I don't want to have to pay to get my bike repaired, so please get off of it. I was like, yep, you know, it's all right. You know, y'all had that laugh, and it's fine. Like, but they, you know, they're nice people. Like, you know, you can't be afraid. You know, in my experience, I'm never afraid to be the person that's, you know, the joke is at the expense of, you know. when learning a language, even. Like, you can't be afraid to look like a fool, because that's how you learn, right? You know, that experience, while yes, it was slightly embarrassing for me, not a whole lot, because I know, you know, my limits and things like that. It was still a great way for me to connect with people, because I sat and I talked to these men while I waited for my taxi, and while we didn't speak the same language, you know, they were happy to engage with me through a translator. And, you know, I was happy to engage with them, you know, and everybody was like, "Oh, you big guy, you know, you look like Mark Henry." And I'm like, "Oh my gosh." I was like, y'all are too much. You know, so, you know, traveling is so important, because it's very generic, but there's a shift in your perspective, right, on life when you see the way other people live, for better or worse. Not worse, I would say better and worse. You know, and a lot of people, especially a lot of, like, you know, young people who are in school, they always talk about a global perspective, right? But what does a global perspective actually mean, right? And that is simply when you look at yourself and when you look at the world around you, you learn to recognize and appreciate the differences that make people who they are, that build a community. You know, the different cultures, the different backgrounds, the different, you know, ideas about life in general. And a global perspective uniquely attunes you to that. And, you know, having been in the place where this is how these people live. And then you start to try new things, right? And it's funny because one of my friends, he's like, "Yo, you are a really good dresser, but like you dress weird." And I'm like, "What do you mean? Like, what do you mean I dress weird?" And he was like, "You don't just wear, like, you know, like hoodies and stuff like normal people do, right?" I mean, I do sometimes, but, you know, and it's true. Like, I wear clothes representative of other countries.
Okay.
And my kind of personal, unique style is to make those styles accepted here, right? So, like, I push the envelope of what people would classify as, like, business formal, and you know, business casual. And, like, for an example, I had a couple meetings on Capitol Hill, and last week, and I showed up and I was wearing, like, a tunic, and I'm like, I'm comfortable. I love it. Like, I know I look good, you know, so, like, you ain't got to tell me I look good. But then, like, you know, most people were like, you know, "Oh, that's an interesting, you know, interesting look," because it was definitely like a very vibrant blue color.
Right.
Blue is my favorite color. And so, you know, and I told one lady who I was in a meeting with, and she was like, "This is a very interesting, like, outfit. It looks very nice on you." And all this stuff. I'm like, "Thank you." I'm like, "But this is business formal. Like, if you go to Morocco, if you go to Senegal, if you go to, you know, any country in Northwest, Central, East Africa, and in the Middle East, like, this is business formal." And I'm like, that's, you know, why do we only accept one thing here, right? When the rest of the world, like, they try to conform to us, why don't we just embrace what everybody else does as well?
I love that. I love that. When you think about all the countries that you travel to, when I went to Ghana and I got off the plane, I felt the sense of home that I've never felt anyplace else. Been to other places, but Ghana was the one place I felt at home. I noticed in African countries, it was like, for the first time, I had a sense of freedom that I never really knew that I was missing.
Yeah.
Have you experienced that sensation as you travel?
Oh yes.
Yeah.
Oh yes. There are a few places that I go and I'm like, yeah, this feels like home, right?
Yeah.
But the most, I would say the place where I experienced it the most is Senegal.
Right.
Like, and it was more so, you know, the Senegal's nickname is La Terre de la Teranga. And Teranga is Wolof for hospitality, right? So it's the land of hospitality. And I remember before my first time ever going, I was so nervous. I was like, all these various scenarios of like how everything can go wrong. I'm like, I'm a Christian. It's a mostly Muslim country. You know, they're gonna kill me. Like, I was like, you know, I'm black, but I ain't as black as some people. Like they gonna know that I'm not from there. I'm like, everybody I look at is skinny, and you know, I'm big. Like, am I gonna starve? Like, oh, it was just everything. Like every possible, you know, what if, even if it wasn't rational,
Right.
you know, was going through my mind. And I remember when I got there, it was like immediately every doubt, every, you know, issue, hesitation, all that stuff, just it went away. And I remember one night I kind of got into a phase where, like, even though I was really enjoying myself the very first time I was there, I was still kind of skittish a little bit, because at the time, like, my French was very basic. I was young. My French was very basic. I was still trying to figure out Wolof, and then I heard people speaking Serer and all these other languages, and I'm like, I don't know what to do. And so I just remember I was like sitting there, and I was like just reading. I think I was reading the Bible, but I was like, yo, I gotta commit myself to really embracing every moment while I'm here, right? And the next day, like, that's what I started to do. I started to be more intentional about making connections with people, about listening to people's stories, right? More than anything. And about, you know, learning in every experience from everybody that I encountered. And, you know, it made a huge difference. Like, Senegal is my second home. It's been, you know, years now where I go back every year.
Wow.
You know, I have family there. You know, my older brother, you know, and probably my number one best friend, right, is from Senegal, and you know, he lives in Canada now. But there's not a, like, recently his wife called, and she's like, I need you to come visit because he won't stop talking about you, and all he talks about is how much he misses you. And I was like, it's funny because I was just like telling somebody how much I miss him. I was like, I miss my brother. You know, but, like, you know, you don't get those experiences unless you put yourself out there and you do it, right? And so, you know, yeah, Senegal was the place where I truly felt it. Like, if I could live and be somewhere else, that is where I would be. That would be home.
Okay. Well, Daquan, I want to thank you so much for sharing your journey. It has been rich.
Thank you.
And I know that all that you shared will help a younger person. It will help a mother who's wondering, you know, what can I have these boys that I'm rearing, and you share with us that having that tribe and that mother being there and being present. She doesn't have to be a father. Get rid of that thought.
Exactly.
Just be the mother, be the person shaping this young man, and I thank you for that. So in closing, anything you want to share with my audience as we close out?
Yeah, I would say it's a big world out there.
Yeah.
Like, it's so much to see, so much to do, and traveling is not as expensive as you would think.
Yeah.
Right? And the biggest thing that I learned, you know, from my travels and my experiences in my life is I learned who I am. And if anything, you know, you deserve and your family deserve an opportunity to figure out who you are. You know, and you know, that's my, you know, kind of endorsement for traveling. You know, but I don't know, I just in my own personal experiences, I figured out that all the hardship that I endured growing up, right, while I have a great mother, a great community around me, there were certain things that they couldn't shield me from, right? There were certain paths that, you know, they couldn't walk with me. And so, you know, I realized that I could have been like the friends that I had growing up, right? Many of them are stuck in the same environment where they just don't see a way out. And many of them also have passed away. And the thing that kind of kept me, in addition to my faith and my community, was my desire to figure out who I am in the context of this great big world. And if anything, like, you owe it to yourself an opportunity to do that. When you do that, all the issues they seem small.
Yeah.
They seem so small and honestly irrelevant.
Right.
In the context of, we have 194 or 96 nations in the world. It's so much to do, so much to see, and we just kind of gotta get out there.
Yeah. Well, I want to thank you so much. I mean, you've taught us in such a way that Scripture comes to mind. Don't despise your small beginnings. Don't worry about what your childhood was like, because God takes all of those things and He works them together for our good.
Absolutely.
And so having a good tribe around you is important. So to my audience, I want to say to you, be inspired. Find out what that passion is and go for it, seek after it. And then once you identify that passion, hey, you got to get some information. You got to be informed, because inspiration plus information brings transformation. See you next week.